Soviets themselves, because the campaign was bogged down and, as he said, no strategic breakthroughs were likely. And to quote him, he said, "The experience of the past years clearly shows that the Afghan problem cannot be solved by military means alone. We should decisively reject our illusions and undertake principally new steps, taking into account," he wrote, "the lessons of the past and the real situation in the country." Now, time from the date of the invasions, only 3 months separated McChrystal and Taskelhoff in terms of years after the invasion. And McChrystal's, or Obama's, July 2011 proposed exit, or start of exit, coincides with the lapse of time after the Taskelhoff report that the Russians finally left. So, when you're looking at a crafted victory, or a crafted circumstances that will be described as victory, is a moot point there. McChrystal's problem, I think, and Obama's problem, is that McChrystal was too late. It's too late at this stage of the Afghanistan war to try to change gears, to try to undo the damage that has been done by insufficient resourcing up to this point, to make a difference. McChrystal sort of is promising a mirage. It doesn't. What he offers doesn't. He identifies so many problems that to turn the thing around would require something like a couple of thousand more troops. Sorry, 200,000 more troops. The numbers just don't stand up, because every problem and every difficult challenge in Afghanistan it's happening so broadly that you can't fix it in one place and then move on to the next place to fix it without your attempt to fix it becoming undone almost immediately. And that's the way the Taliban, the insurgencies, work in Afghanistan. They move from community to community as they need to. They don't have to dig in. And when they move into a community, when they issue threats, unlike the American presence is an implied threat, or the presence of Afghan defense forces is an implied threat. With the Taliban, it's a real threat. And you don't have to behead too many people to make the rest of the people believe that they should acknowledge your threat as a real threat, as opposed to the implied threat of a passing US commander who says you might not get your reconstruction aid if you don't cooperate with us. So when the Taliban issue threats, they're believed. When the Americans imply a threat, be it about aid or whatever, they're not believed. The whole timing issue on McChrystal's report is up in the air. Now, McChrystal talked about himself. He wrote that the war could be lost. Unless there was significant change within 12 months, the war could be lost. His report wasn't delivered to Washington until 3 months after he had written it. So, you know, he was down to 9 months before the report was even delivered. He's talking about a 12-month window of opportunity. Moving troops. This year, in March last year, Obama authorized 20,000 troops to be moved to Afghanistan, extra troops. The last of them are still just arriving. The American military cannot move 20,000 troops in less than a year. So to get the 30,000, 40,000 that Obama has authorized there, before, the last ones will be turning, if they're pulling out in July 11, they'll be turning around immediately to come home. They won't have had any time on the ground. All of the experts who are writing about Afghanistan, and in particular David Kilcullen, who's an advisor to McChrystal, you know, McChrystal says 12 months will turn this around. They're all saying at least 2 years of savage fighting before it can be turned around. So there's two wars are being fought now. One is a war of information here in terms of the different constituencies that Obama has to appeal to, the Democratic side of politics in terms of being seen to be getting out, the Republican side in terms of needing to be seen to be staying in, to be fighting the war on terror, and then there's the military war on the ground as well. So this collision of so many agendas that that nothing holds. There's no coherence. There's no sensible, unified plan. The Washington Post the week before last had a very interesting analysis of the perceptions of the Obama response to McChrystal as seen through the senior American military brass and as seen through the senior political officials. The senior political officials saw it as, yes, we're getting out on July 11. The military said, no, we're not. And it was almost as though Obama didn't matter the way these two were positioning themselves to fight this out themselves. As the McChrystal report was being prepared, one of his senior officers made a very interesting comment. He said, "We've been here for 8 years, but it hasn't been an 8-year learning experience." He said, "Each year we fought the same war again. So each year we haven't learned the lessons from the previous year. We've done it again and again, sort of spinning the wheels." And this is something that McChrystal articulated himself in. He talked about the failure of the Americans, and when I talk about Americans, I'm talking about the whole international contingent. It doesn't matter that there are other international players there. In the eyes of the Afghans in particular, as far as they're concerned, it is an American operation. It was the same in Iraq with the international forces. Didn't matter what uniform the troops were wearing, the locals all saw them as American, and they see it as an American-led operation. But McChrystal, talking about the relationship with the local people, he says, "We operate in a manner that distances us physically and psychologically from the people we seek to protect." Now, in some ways, that's quite reasonable. If you spend time on the ground with American troops, particularly on the Afghan-Pakistan border region, moving around that area, which I've done with them, I mean, it's a lethal country to go driving. One day, in the space of an hour, we had 3 roadside bombs driving down one road. So how you can relate to the locals when you're driving past them in a vehicle that is heavily armed, everyone is cocooned inside it. There's no eye contact with the locals as you drive past. We were visiting villages in the American theatre of operation that hadn't had any Afghan government or American troop visits for 2 years. I mean, this is a country where there's no communication. They don't even, half of them aren't aware of what's happening around them. Their interests, their expectations are very limited. And when they don't see any sign of their central government or the American forces that are propping up this government for 2 years, why can they be expected to believe in either? Especially when the Taliban are on the ridgeline, threatening to bomb the Americans as they're coming through. And we're listening to them on their handsets, talking about how they wish they had suicide bombs so that they could move down amongst us. It's the Taliban are everywhere, and the Americans and the Kabul government are not. In terms of control of who controls territory, the United Nations at the moment says 60% of the country is not secure enough for them to operate in. The International Council on Security and Development, which some of you may know as CENLAS, which does some interesting research work in Afghanistan, they estimate that 80% of the country has active Taliban presence. And McChrystal himself, he was coy.